The silver moonlight painted the trail ahead as Rebecca Porter clutched her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, the sound of distant hoofbeats driving her deeper into the woods. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stumbled through the underbrush, the hem of her once fine dress now mudded and torn. Behind her lay the life she'd fled, a life promised in gold but delivered in bruises. Ahead of her lay only uncertainty and the whispered promise of freedom in the untamed West of 1876. The air grew colder as she pushed forward, the Montana Territory's rugged landscape both her sanctuary and her challenge. 3 days she'd been running, ever since she'd stolen away in the night from Harold Whitman's estate with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pouch of coins she'd secretly saved. Harold, the wealthy mine owner who'd courted her with sweet words back east, only to reveal his true nature once the wedding band was on her finger. Rebecca paused, leaning against a pine tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The distant sound of water called to her, and she followed it to a small stream. As she knelt to drink, a twig snapped behind her. "Madam, you're a long way from anywhere a lady ought to be," came a deep voice, steady and measured. Rebecca spun around, nearly losing her balance. Standing before her was a tall figure, his features shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The glint of a star-shaped badge on his chest caught what little moonlight filtered through the trees. "Please," she whispered, "I cannot go back." The man stepped forward, and she could now see his face weathered and tanned, with eyes that seemed to hold the vastness of the open plains. "I'm not asking you to go anywhere, madam, just wondering what brings a fine lady like yourself into these woods at night." Rebecca hesitated, searching his face for signs of deception. "I'm running from my husband." The man nodded slowly, as if this revelation was as common as commenting on the weather. "Name's Thomas Reed. Most folks call me Reed. Rebecca Porter." She paused before adding, "Though he made me take his name, Whitman." Reed's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Harold Whitman." The mine owner, Rebecca nodded, instinctively taking a step back. "Don't worry," Reed said, raising his hands slightly. "I've had my run-ins with Whitman. Can't say I'm a fan of how he conducts his business or treats his workers." "He'll come looking," Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper, the cowboy's mouth set in a hard line. His hand moved to rest on the worn holster at his hip. "Let him find me first." Those words, spoken with such quiet certainty, sent a shiver through Rebecca that had nothing to do with the cold night air. "You're the law," she said, glancing at his badge. "Aren't you supposed to return me to my husband?" Reed's laugh was dry as prairie dust. "I'm a territorial marshal, madam. My job is to uphold justice, not unjust marriages." He looked at the darkening sky. "Night's getting deeper. My cabin's about a mile from here. You can rest there safely while we figure out what comes next." Rebecca hesitated. Trust didn't come easily after what she'd endured. "I give you my word," Reed added, seeming to read her thoughts. "No harm will come to you under my watch." After a moment's consideration, Rebecca nodded. She had few options, and something about this quiet lawman's steady gaze gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt in months. They walked in silence, Reed occasionally stopping to help her over a fallen log or around a particularly muddy patch. His cabin appeared as they crested a small hill, a sturdy structure nestled against the backdrop of pines, with a thin wisp of smoke still rising from the chimney. "It's not much," Reed said as he pushed open the door, "but it's warm and dry." The interior was simple but neat: a table and chairs, a small cook stove, a bed in one corner, and various supplies organized along the walls. Reed quickly built up the fire, its warmth soon filling the space. "You take the bed," he said, gesturing to the corner. "I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," Reed interrupted gently. "You look dead on your feet, Mrs. Porter." The use of her maiden name didn't escape Rebecca's notice, and gratitude washed over her. "Thank you," she said simply. Reed nodded, then busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans and cornbread. They ate in relative silence, Rebecca only now realizing how famished she'd been. When she'd eaten her fill, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. "Rest," Reed said. "Tomorrow we'll talk about getting you somewhere safe." As Rebecca sank into the surprisingly comfortable bed, she watched Reed arrange his bedroll near the fire. Despite her situation, despite the fear and uncertainty that had been her constant companions these past days, she felt something unfamiliar settle over her, a fragile sense of hope. Reed extinguished the lamp, leaving only the firelight dancing across the cabin walls. "Sleep well, Mrs. Porter," he said quietly. "You're safe tonight." For the first time in months, Rebecca believed those words might actually be true. Morning broke with golden light streaming through the cabin's single window. Rebecca woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous night rushed back. She sat up quickly, finding Reed already awake, cooking something that smelled wonderfully of coffee and bacon. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in a long time," Rebecca admitted, smoothing her crumpled dress as best she could before rising. "Thank you." Reed nodded, serving up plates of bacon and biscuits. As they ate, he studied her with those steady eyes. "If you don't mind my asking, how'd a fine Eastern lady like yourself end up married to Harold Whitman?" Rebecca sighed, setting down her fork. "My father died 2 years ago, leaving my mother and me with nothing but debts." Harold appeared like a savior, wealthy, charming, promising a new life out west. Her voice grew bitter. "It wasn't until after the wedding that I learned what kind of man he truly is. The kind who uses his fists to make his point," Reed said quietly. Rebecca nodded, instinctively touching the fading bruise at her jawline. "And his influence to ensure no one would help me. The sheriff in Silver Creek is practically on his payroll." Reed's jaw tightened. "Sounds like Hastings. Never did trust that badge for hire." He poured more coffee. "Whitman's a powerful man in these parts, owns half the silver mines and has fingers in every business worth mentioning. Which is why I need to get far away," Rebecca said. "Perhaps to California or even back east." Reed considered this. "That takes money, which I'm guessing you're short on." "I have some," Rebecca said, touching the small pouch hidden in her pocket. "Not much, but enough for train fare, perhaps. Problem is, Whitman will have telegraphed ahead to every station within 100 miles. He'll have men watching." Rebecca's heart sank. "Then what am I to do?" Reed stood, moving to a chest in the corner of the cabin. He pulled out a map, spreading it on the table. "There's a settlement about 40 miles north of here. Friend of mine runs a trading post there, Sadie Wilson. She helps women in difficult situations. She could hide you until we figure something more permanent." "We?" Rebecca asked, surprised by the inclusive term. Reed's eyes met hers. "I've been trying to build a case against Whitman for months. Worker mistreatment, claim jumping, bribery. But he's careful, and I haven't had a witness willing to speak against him." He paused. "I'm not suggesting you put yourself in danger, but your testimony could help bring him down." Rebecca stared at the map, tracing the route with her finger. "If I help you and you fail to arrest him, he would kill me." "I won't let that happen," Reed said, and the conviction in his voice made her look up. "Whether you choose to help with the case or not, I'll make sure you get somewhere safe. You have my word." Before Rebecca could respond, a sound outside caught their attention, hoofbeats approaching. Reed moved swiftly to the window, peering out cautiously. "Get your things," he said quietly. "We need to move." "Is it him?" Rebecca asked, fear clutching at her throat. "No, but it's one of his men, Ben Hollister. He's tracking something, and I'd bet my badge it's you." Reed grabbed his gun belt, strapping it on with practiced ease before collecting a rifle from above the door. He tossed Rebecca a worn but clean coat. "Put this on. We'll head out the back way." Within minutes, they were slipping through the trees behind the cabin, making their way to a small stable where Reed kept his horses. A handsome chestnut gelding and a speckled mare stood waiting. "Can you ride?" Reed asked as he quickly saddled both animals. "Yes," Rebecca said. Her father had insisted she learn, much to her mother's dismay. Now she was grateful for his stubbornness. "Good, take Pepper here," he said, patting the mare. "She's sure-footed in rough country." They mounted up just as shouts came from the direction of the cabin. Reed led them deeper into the forest, following a narrow trail that would have been invisible to the untrained eye. They rode in tense silence for nearly an hour, the sounds of pursuit eventually fading behind them. Finally, Reed slowed his pace, allowing their horses to walk side by side. "We should be safe for now," he said. "Hollister's a decent tracker, but these woods are my home." "Why are you helping me?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "You're risking your position, your safety." Reed was quiet for a long moment. "My sister," he finally said, "married a man like Whitman. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late." His voice grew rough. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help you." The simple honesty in his words touched something deep within Rebecca. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said softly. Reed nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Whitman and men like him think their money and power put them above the law. I aim to prove them wrong." He glanced at her. "But first, we need to get you to Sadie's place." The journey north was arduous, taking them through rugged terrain deliberately chosen to confound any pursuers. Reed proved to be a skilled guide, finding game trails and hidden passes that kept them moving steadily without exposing them to open country where they might be spotted. At night, they made small camps, Reed teaching Rebecca how to build a fire that produced minimal smoke and how to listen to the forest for signs of danger. Despite the circumstances, Rebecca found herself absorbing these lessons eagerly, feeling a growing sense of self-reliance that had been systematically stripped from her during her marriage. On their third evening, as they sat beside a small fire in a sheltered hollow, Rebecca studied her companion's profile. In the dancing light, his features seemed carved from the very landscape around them, strong, weathered, enduring. "Tell me about being a marshal," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Reed looked up from the rabbit he was roasting. "Not much to tell. I keep the peace, track outlaws, protect those who need protecting. It seems a lonely life." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "It can be, but there's a freedom to it that suits me." "No wife waiting at home?" The question slipped out before Rebecca could stop it, and she immediately felt her cheeks warm. Reed's expression softened. "There was someone once, Sarah. She didn't take to the life, the long absences, the danger. Can't say I blame her." "What happened to her?" "Last I heard, she married a shopkeeper in Denver, has 3 children now." There was no bitterness in his voice, only a quiet acceptance. Rebecca nodded, understanding all too well how life rarely followed the paths one expected. "I always thought I'd have children by now," she admitted. "A home filled with laughter, not fear." Reed handed her a portion of the rabbit. "There's still time for that dream, Rebecca." The use of her given name, spoken with such gentle assurance, made her heart beat a little faster. She accepted the food, their fingers brushing briefly, sending an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As Rebecca helped clean up after the meal, she couldn't help but notice how naturally they moved together, anticipating each other's needs without words. "We should reach Sadie's by midday tomorrow," Reed said as he banked the fire for the night. "You'll like her. Toughest woman I've ever known, with a heart to match. And she helps women. Like me?" Reed nodded. "Sadie was married to a miner who beat her within an inch of her life. After he died in a cave-in, she used his insurance money to build the trading post. Now she offers sanctuary to anyone who needs it." "There are that many of us?" Rebecca asked sadly. "More than there should be," Reed answered, his voice low. "But women like Sadie and like you brave enough to run, you give me hope that things can change." Rebecca looked away, uncomfortable with being called brave. "I wasn't brave when it mattered. I endured for too long." Reed's hand gently touched her shoulder. "Surviving isn't cowardice, Rebecca, and when the time came you found the courage to leave, that counts for something." His touch, warm and steady through the borrowed coat, anchored her in the present moment. Rebecca found herself leaning slightly into it, taking comfort in this simple human connection that asked nothing of her. "We should get some rest," Reed said after a moment, withdrawing his hand. Dawn comes early. As had become their routine, Reed gave Rebecca the only bedroll, insisting on using his saddle and coat for himself. Tonight, however, she found herself strangely reluctant to put distance between them. "Thank you," she said as she settled into her makeshift bed. "Not just for the help, but for seeing me as I am." Reed looked at her across the dying embers of the fire, his eyes reflecting the last of the light. "Sleep well, Rebecca," he said softly. As she drifted towards sleep, Rebecca realized something had shifted between them, something tender and unspoken, growing quietly like the first green shoots after a long winter. Morning brought low clouds and the promise of rain. They broke camp quickly, Reed's urgency apparent in his movements. "Storm's coming," he explained as they mounted up. "We need to reach Sadie's before it hits." They rode at a faster pace than previous days, the terrain gradually changing from dense forest to rolling hills dotted with aspen groves. By mid-morning they crested a rise that afforded them a view of the valley below. In the distance, Rebecca could make out a collection of buildings nestled against the base of a mountain. "That's Pine Creek," Reed said, pointing. "Sadie's place is on the outskirts, near that bend in the river." As they started down the slope, Reed suddenly pulled up short, raising a hand for Rebecca to stop. His posture had changed, alert and tense. "What is it?" she whispered. Reed's eyes narrowed as he scanned the tree line below. "Not sure, something doesn't feel right." They remained motionless for long minutes, the horses shifting restlessly beneath them. Finally, Reed pointed to a thin plume of dust rising from the road leading to town. "Riders," he said grimly, "moving fast and heading into Pine Creek." Rebecca's stomach clenched with fear. "Could it be Whitman's men? Possibly, or it could be nothing to do with us." He considered for a moment. "We'll avoid the main road, come in from the west instead. It'll take longer, but it's safer." They skirted wide around the valley, using the cover of the trees as much as possible. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they approached a modest two-story building set apart from the main settlement. A hand-painted sign identified it as Wilson's Trading Post and General Store. Reed led them to a small barn behind the main building. As they dismounted, the back door of the trading post opened, and a tall woman with steel-gray hair stepped out, a shotgun held casually in her arms. "That's far enough," she called, her voice strong despite her years. "It's Reed, Sadie," he answered, keeping his hands visible. "Thomas Reed." The woman squinted through the increasing rain, then lowered her weapon. "Well, didn't expect to see you again so soon." Her sharp eyes moved to Rebecca. "And who's your friend?" "This is Rebecca Porter. She needs your help." Understanding immediately dawned on Sadie's weathered face. "Whitman's wife," she said, not a question but a statement. Rebecca stiffened in surprise. "How did you news travels, even to backwater towns like this?" Sadie gestured toward the door. "Come inside before you both drown. We can talk where it's dry." The interior of the trading post was warm and cluttered in a comfortable way, with shelves of goods lining the walls and a pot-bellied stove radiating heat at the center. Sadie led them through the store to a cozy living area in the back. "Sit," she commanded, bustling about to pour coffee. "You both look half frozen." As they warmed themselves with the strong, bitter coffee, Reed explained their situation. Sadie listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly grave. "Whitman's men were here yesterday," she finally said, asking questions, flashing money around. "Said they were looking for a runaway wife who'd stolen valuable property." Rebecca's hands tightened around her mug. "I took nothing but what was mine. Don't need to convince me, girl. I know Whitman's type." Sadie's eyes were kind despite her brusque manner. "But you should know they're offering a $500 reward for information leading to your return." "500, Reed whistled low. "He must be desperate, or furious," Rebecca whispered. Sadie reached across the table to pat her hand. "Don't you worry. No one around here would cross me to help Whitman. His mining operation put too many local boys in early graves. Still, Reed said, we can't stay long, it's too risky for all involved. Sadie nodded. I agree, but you both need rest and supplies before you move on. She stood, her decision apparently made. Rebecca can stay in my spare room upstairs. Reed, you'll take the room behind the store. I should keep watch, he protested. My nephew Patrick handles that. Former Army scout sees better at night than most cats. Sadie's tone brooked no argument. Now, Rebecca, let's find you some proper clothes. Can't have you running around the wilderness in that city dress. Rebecca found herself ushered upstairs, where Sadie provided her with sturdy trousers, flannel shirts, and a pair of well-worn boots that fit surprisingly well. These belong to my niece, Sadie explained. She's in San Francisco now, married to a ship captain. Won't miss them. Later, freshly bathed and dressed in her new practical attire, Rebecca stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and without the constriction of corsets and petticoats, she felt strangely liberated. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting Sadie. Instead, Reed entered, stopping short when he saw her. For a moment he simply stared, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Sadie asked me to tell you supper's ready, he finally said. Rebecca smiled, amused by his apparent loss for words. Do I look that different, you look? He paused, searching for the right word, free. The simple observation touched her deeply. I feel it too, for the first time in a long while. Reed's answering smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines and bringing a warmth to his eyes that made Rebecca's heart skip. It suits you, he said quietly. They stood there, the moment stretching between them, filled with something neither was ready to name. Finally, Reed cleared his throat. We should go down. Sadie doesn't like to be kept waiting. Dinner was a surprisingly cheerful affair, with Sadie regaling them with stories of the eccentric characters who frequented her trading post. Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in months, the constant fear temporarily forgotten in the warmth of good company. As they finished their meal, however, the conversation turned serious once more. I've been thinking, Sadie said, refilling their coffee cups. You can't keep running forever. Sooner or later, Whitman will catch up, or you'll run out of places to hide. What do you suggest? Reed asked. You need to discredit him publicly. Make him lose face so badly that coming after Rebecca would only bring him more shame. Sadie turned to Rebecca. You said he mistreats his workers. Rebecca nodded. Terribly. Men die in his mines regularly, but he bribes officials to look the other way. And those who speak up disappear or have accidents. That's consistent with what I've been investigating, Reed added, but without proof or witnesses willing to testify. What about his business ledgers? Rebecca asked suddenly. Harold keeps detailed records of everything, including payments to officials and hired thugs. He never thought I paid attention when he worked in his study, but I know exactly where he keeps them. Reed and Sadie exchanged glances. That would be exactly the evidence needed to bring charges, Reed said slowly. But it would mean going back to Silver Creek, right into his territory. It's too dangerous, Sadie protested, but it might be the only way, Rebecca countered, surprising herself with her own resolve. I can't run forever, and I won't let him continue hurting others. Reed studied her face. You're serious about this? I am. Rebecca sat straighter. I lived in that house for 8 months. I know its rhythms, the servants' schedules, Harold's habits. With the right plan, I could get in and out with those ledgers before anyone knew I was there. Not alone, you wouldn't, Reed said firmly. If we do this, and I'm not saying we do it together. Sadie sighed heavily. You're both fools, brave fools, but fools nonetheless. She stood, collecting the dishes. Get some rest tonight. In the morning, if you're still set on this madness, we'll make a plan. That night, Rebecca lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, her mind racing with thoughts of what returning to Silver Creek might mean. The fear was still there, but alongside it was something new, a fierce determination to reclaim her life from Harold's shadow. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders before opening the door to find Reed standing in the hallway. "I couldn't sleep," he said simply. "Thought you might be awake too." Rebecca stepped aside to let him enter, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, the two of them alone in her bedroom, the house quiet around them. Reed seemed to realize it too, maintaining a respectful distance as he moved to stand by the window. "Are you sure about this plan?" he asked, looking out at the rain-soaked night. "Once we set it in motion, there's no turning back." Rebecca joined him at the window. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid of spending my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for Harold to find me." Reed turned to face her, his expression solemn. "I've spent my career upholding the law, Rebecca, but what we're planning breaking into a man's home, taking his property, it crosses a line. Those ledgers are evidence of crimes, not just property," she countered. "And sometimes justice requires bending the rules, doesn't it?" A small smile touched his lips. "You sound like me trying to convince my superiors to let me investigate Whitman in the first place. And did they agree?" "Not officially. This case, it's personal for me because of my sister." His voice grew quiet. "And now because of you." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Rebecca found herself moving closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his eyes. "Thomas," she said, using his given name for the first time. "Whatever happens in Silver Creek, I want you to know that meeting you has changed me. You've shown me what a good man truly is." Reed's hand rose, hesitating for a moment before gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you've reminded me why this badge means something," he said softly. "Why the fight matters." The touch of his fingers against her cheek sent warmth cascading through her. Rebecca found herself leaning slightly closer, her heart racing with an emotion that had nothing to do with fear. For a moment, it seemed Reed might close the remaining distance between them. Instead, he stepped back, his hand falling to his side. "We should both try to rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Tomorrow will bring challenges enough." Rebecca nodded, ignoring the flicker of disappointment. "Good night, Thomas." "Good night, Rebecca." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Whatever happens, I won't let him hurt you again, that's a promise." After he left, Rebecca returned to the window, watching raindrops trace silver paths down the glass. For all the danger that lay ahead, she realized she was no longer simply running away from Harold. Now, she was running toward something else, a future she was only beginning to envision, with a man whose quiet strength had awakened something long dormant within her. Morning arrived with clear skies and renewed purpose. Over breakfast, the three of them outlined a daring plan. Using Sadie's connections, they would spread word that Rebecca had been spotted heading west toward California, hopefully drawing Whitman's attention away from Silver Creek temporarily. Meanwhile, Reed and Rebecca would double back, approaching the town from an unexpected direction. Sadie provided them with supplies, including a small revolver for Rebecca, which she tucked into the pocket of her new coat with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. "Remember," Sadie said as they prepared to depart, "Whitman's house is on the hill overlooking town. You'll be visible from a long way off if you approach directly." "We'll come in through Blackwater Canyon," Reed assured her. "It's longer, but it'll keep us hidden until we reach the edge of town." Sadie hugged Rebecca tightly. "You're braver than you know, girl. When this is over, there's always a place for you here if you need it." "Thank you," Rebecca whispered, suddenly emotional. In just one day, this gruff, kind woman had shown her more maternal care than she'd experienced in years. They set out under the midday sun, traveling light and fast. Reed had traded their horses for fresh mounts, a pair of sturdy Mustangs accustomed to rough country. As they rode, he taught Rebecca more about tracking and moving unseen through the landscape, skills she absorbed with growing confidence. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 20 miles, making camp in a sheltered ravine. As they sat beside their small fire, Reed spread out a rough map of Silver Creek and the surrounding area. "Whitman's estate is here," he said, pointing. "According to what you've told me, his study is on the ground floor, facing the gardens. Rebecca nodded. The window has a simple latch that can be opened from outside if you know how. I used to slip out that way sometimes when he was. She faltered. Reed's hand covered hers briefly. You don't have to explain, she gave him a grateful smile. The ledgers are kept in a locked cabinet behind his desk. He keeps the key in his desk drawer. He thinks it's cleverly hidden, but I've seen him retrieve it many times. And the servants? Most live in town, coming only during the day. Only the housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, and Harold's valet stay overnight. Mrs. Winters takes laudanum for her arthritis and is always asleep by 9. The valet, Jenkins, sleeps near Harold's room on the 2nd floor. Reed nodded, impressed by her detailed knowledge. When does Whitman himself retire? Unless he has company, he's usually in his study until around 11, then upstairs to bed. So our best window is between 11 and dawn, Reed mused. We'll need to be inside the grounds by 10, ready to move once he's upstairs. The plan continued to take shape as they talked into the night, anticipating complications and planning contingencies. Through it all, Rebecca was struck by how Reed treated her as an equal partner, valuing her input and never once suggesting she was too fragile or incapable. When they finally settled down to sleep, Rebecca found herself studying Reed's profile in the dying firelight. "Thomas," she said softly, "if something goes wrong tomorrow." He turned to face her. "Nothing will go wrong." "But if it does," she persisted, "I want you to know that meeting you has been worth everything, even if Reed moved suddenly, closing the distance between them." His hand gently cupped her cheek. "Nothing will happen to you," he said fiercely. "Not while I draw breath." The intensity in his eyes took her breath away. Rebecca found herself leaning into his touch, her heart hammering against her ribs. When his lips finally met hers, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, not the demanding possession she'd known with Harold, but a question, an offering. She answered by winding her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally broke apart, Reed rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered, though his arms remained around her. "Why not?" Rebecca asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Because tomorrow we ride into danger in this." He struggled for words. "This complicates things." Rebecca smiled. "Perhaps, or perhaps it clarifies them." She kissed him again, briefly but with certainty. "Now I know exactly what I'm fighting for." Reed held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow will test us both." They fell asleep side by side, closer than on previous nights but still maintaining a respectful distance. Yet something fundamental had shifted between them. A future once unimaginable now seemed possible, if only they could survive the coming day. Dawn brought a sky heavy with clouds, promising rain by afternoon. They broke camp early, speaking little as they prepared for the journey ahead. The weight of their mission settled over them, tempering yesterday's emotional revelations with the reality of the risks they faced. They reached the outskirts of Silver Creek by mid-afternoon, approaching through Blackwater Canyon as planned. The narrow passage kept them hidden from view as they drew closer to town, finally stopping in a dense copse of trees overlooking Whitman's estate. From their vantage point, Rebecca could see the imposing 3-story house that had been her prison for 8 months. The sight of it made her stomach clench with remembered fear, but she pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. "There's more activity than usual," Reed observed, studying the house through a small spyglass. "Looks like Whitman might be entertaining." Rebecca frowned, taking the spyglass when he offered it. She could see several expensive carriages in the circular drive and servants moving purposefully about. "It's Wednesday," she realized. "He hosts poker games every other Wednesday evening." Reed considered this development. "That complicates things. How late do these games usually run?" "Until the early hours, sometimes. But Harold always retires to his study afterward to count his winnings and update his ledgers." She lowered the spyglass. "This could work in our favor." He'll be distracted by his guests and the house will be noisy. Reed nodded slowly. We'll need to adjust our timing, wait until the game breaks up, then make our move when he's alone in the study. They retreated deeper into the trees to wait out the remaining daylight hours. As darkness fell, a light rain began, further aiding their plan by reducing visibility and masking sound. Shortly after midnight, they observed the first carriages departing. By 1 in the morning, the house had grown quieter, with only a single light visible on the ground floor of the study. "That's our signal," Rebecca whispered. "He's alone now." They moved silently through the rain-soaked gardens, keeping to the shadows. The back of the house faced away from town, offering them cover as they approached the study window. Rebecca led the way, her heart pounding but her hands steady as she worked the latch just as she described. The window swung open without a sound. Inside, they could see Harold Whitman seated at his desk, his back to them as he counted stacks of money. The study was exactly as Rebecca remembered, opulent, with leather-bound books lining the walls and expensive carpets underfoot. Reed gave her a questioning look. She nodded, and they slipped inside, their movements masked by the sound of rain against the windows. Reed drew his revolver, moving to position himself between Rebecca and Whitman. "Don't move, Whitman," he said quietly. Harold Whitman froze, then slowly turned in his chair. His face, once handsome before drink and cruelty, had bloated. It registered first surprise, then rage as he recognized Rebecca. "You," he snarled. "I might have known you'd come crawling back." "I'm not back," Rebecca said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "I'm here for evidence of your crimes." Whitman's eyes narrowed as they shifted to Reed. "And who's this, your new protector?" His laugh was ugly. "Do you know what she is, Marshal? A thief and a liar, my property returning to its rightful place." Rebecca felt Reed tense beside her but was grateful when he maintained his composure. "The only thief here is you, Whitman, stealing lives in your minds, stealing justice with your bribes. Big words from a man trespassing in my home." Whitman's hand moved slowly toward his desk drawer. "Don't," Reed warned, his revolver steady. "Hands where I can see them." Whitman complied, a cold smile playing at his lips. "What exactly do you think you're doing here, Marshal? Breaking into a citizen's home without a warrant. Your superiors will have your badge for this." "Perhaps," Reed acknowledged, "but when they see what's in those ledgers, I think they'll overlook the irregularities." Rebecca moved toward the cabinet behind the desk. "The key, Harold, in your desk drawer. You'll hang for this," Whitman hissed. "Both of you." Rebecca ignored him, retrieving the small brass key from its hiding place. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the cabinet, revealing the row of leather-bound ledgers inside. "Which ones?" Reed asked, his eyes never leaving Whitman. "The red ones," Rebecca answered, pulling 3 volumes from the shelf. "These cover the last 2 years." As she secured the ledgers in her satchel, a floorboard creaked in the hallway outside. Reed's eyes flicked toward the door, a momentary distraction that Whitman seized upon. He lunged for the desk drawer, pulling out a small derringer. "Rebecca, down," Reed shouted, firing his revolver as Whitman raised the smaller gun. The shot rang out, deafeningly loud in the confined space. Whitman jerked backward, clutching his shoulder as the derringer clattered to the floor. Rebecca had dropped to the ground at Reed's warning, heart racing as the study door burst open. Jenkins, Whitman's valet, stood there wide-eyed, taking in the scene before shouting for help. Reed grabbed Rebecca's hand, pulling her toward the window. "Time to go," he said urgently. "Now." They scrambled through the window just as more shouts erupted inside the house. Reed led them through the gardens at a run, the rain now coming down in sheets. Behind them, lanterns bobbed as Whitman's men gave chase. They reached their horses and mounted quickly, spurring the animals toward the canyon. The sound of pursuit grew fainter as they navigated the narrow passage that few others knew well enough to follow in darkness. By dawn, they had put substantial distance between themselves and Silver Creek, finally stopping to rest in a sheltered cave beside a small creek. Reed built a small fire while Rebecca examined their hard-won prize, the ledgers that documented years of Whitman's criminal activities. "It's all here," she said, turning pages with growing excitement. Bribes to Judge Holloway, payments to men for special services on the dates miners who complained went missing, falsified safety reports. She looked up at Reed. "This is enough, isn't it?" Reed nodded, coming to sit beside her. "More than enough. But Whitman will know we're coming for him now. We need to get these to the federal authorities in Helena as quickly as possible." "Will he follow us?" Rebecca asked, suddenly remembering the sound of the gunshot, the sight of Whitman clutching his shoulder. "The wound wasn't fatal," Reed said, reading her thoughts. "And yes, he'll come after us with everything he has." Rebecca closed the ledger, suddenly weary. "Then we shouldn't linger." Reed's hand covered hers. "First, rest. We've been riding all night." His eyes searched her face. "Are you all right? It can't have been easy facing him again." "Strangely, it was easier than I expected," Rebecca admitted, seeing him there, realizing how small he seemed compared to the monster in my memories. She shook her head. "I'm not afraid of him anymore, not like before." Reed's smile was gentle as he reached out to tuck a strand of wet hair behind her ear. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Rebecca Porter." The use of her maiden name, so deliberate and respectful, made her heart swell. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." His arms came around her, pulling her close. "It's not over yet," he cautioned. "But yes, we did." They remained that way for a long moment, drawing strength from each other as the rain continued to fall outside their shelter. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they slept side by side, the ledgers secured safely between them. They woke to clearing skies and renewed determination. The journey to Helena would take several days, even pushing their horses hard. They traveled by less frequented routes, avoiding main roads where Whitman's men might be watching. On the evening of the second day, they made camp beside a small lake. The mountains reflected perfectly in its still surface. As Reed prepared a simple meal, Rebecca found herself watching him, struck by how natural it felt to be here with him, how right. "What happens after Helena?" she asked suddenly. Reed looked up from the fire. "Assuming all goes well, federal agents will arrest Whitman. There will be a trial, you'll need to testify. And after that, what happens to us?" The question hung in the air between them. Reed set aside the coffee pot he'd been preparing and moved to sit beside her. "What do you want to happen?" he asked softly. Rebecca took a deep breath. "I want to be free, truly free, not just from Harold, but to build a life of my own choosing." She met his eyes. "And I've come to realize that life includes you if you'll have me." Reed's expression softened. "Rebecca, I've spent years alone, convinced that was my lot. Then you appeared in those woods and everything changed." His hand found hers. "I'm not a wealthy man. The marshal's life is dangerous, often thankless, but if that's a life you could share." "It is," she said simply. "I don't need wealth or ease. I need honesty, respect, and—" She hesitated, then finished bravely, "love." Reed's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Those I can promise, with all my heart." He leaned forward, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of all they'd been through together and all that lay ahead. Rebecca responded in kind, her arms winding around his neck as the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of its own. When they finally broke apart, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he whispered, "when you're legally free, I want to make this right. Properly." Rebecca smiled, understanding his meaning. "I'd like that very much." They spent that night beneath the stars, talking of futures once unimaginable, a home together, perhaps children someday, a life built on mutual respect and deepening love. For all the uncertainty that still lay ahead, Rebecca felt a peace she'd never known before. Morning brought them within a day's ride of Helena. As they prepared to set out, Reed suddenly stiffened, his head turning toward the forest behind them. "What is it?" Rebecca asked, recognizing the alertness in his posture. "Riders," he said quietly, "coming fast, at least 4, maybe more." Rebecca's heart sank. "Whitman? Likely." Reed quickly doused their fire. "We need to move now." They mounted hastily, spurring their horses toward Helena. The sound of pursuit grew louder behind them, hoofbeats pounding against the earth as Whitman's men gained ground. "They're faster than us," Rebecca called, glancing back to see dust rising behind them. Reed nodded grimly. "We need to split up. You take the ledgers and continue to Helena." "I'll draw them off." "No," Rebecca protested. "They'll kill you. They have to catch me first," Reed said with a confidence she knew was partly for her benefit. "I know these mountains better than they do." He pulled his horse alongside hers. "The main road is just beyond that ridge. Follow it straight to Helena. It's less than 20 miles. Ask for Marshal James Blackwood at the federal building. Tell him everything. He's a good man. He'll help you." "Thomas, please, I'll find you," he promised, his eyes holding hers. "Trust me." Before she could argue further, he leaned across the space between them, kissing her quickly but fiercely. "Go," he urged. Now, with a heavy heart, Rebecca spurred her horse toward the ridge. Behind her, she heard Reed fire his revolver into the air, drawing the attention of their pursuers before veering sharply west, away from her path. The plan worked. The riders followed Reed, their shouts carrying on the wind. Rebecca rode hard for the main road, the precious ledgers secure in her satchel. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, focusing on the task ahead. Reed was counting on her. She would not fail him. The journey to Helena seemed endless, each mile stretching longer than the last. By the time the city came into view, Rebecca's horse was lathered with sweat, and her own body ached with exhaustion. Still, she pressed on, making directly for the imposing stone building that housed the federal offices. Marshal James Blackwood proved to be exactly as Reed had described, a solid, serious man who listened intently as Rebecca explained their situation. When she produced the ledgers, his eyebrows rose incrementally, the only outward sign of his interest. "Reed always was a tenacious one," he commented as he examined the damning evidence. "But breaking into Whitman's home—" He shook his head. "That's crossing a line." "A line worth crossing," Rebecca insisted. "Harold Whitman has destroyed countless lives. He would have destroyed mine if not for Thomas." Blackwood studied her for a long moment. "And where is Reed now?" Rebecca's voice caught. "Drawing off Whitman's men to protect me." Something in her tone must have revealed the depth of her feelings, for Blackwood's expression softened slightly. "I'll send riders immediately. If Reed is out there, we'll find him." True to his word, Blackwood dispatched 6 armed deputies within the hour. Meanwhile, he arranged secure accommodations for Rebecca and placed the ledgers in a guarded safe. By nightfall, telegrams had been sent to Washington, and the wheels of justice had begun to turn against Harold Whitman. But Rebecca could take little satisfaction in these developments as darkness fell with no word of Reed. She paced the small room provided for her, alternating between hope and despair. Had he escaped Whitman's men? Was he injured somewhere in the wilderness, or worse? She refused to complete the thought. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Federal agents arrived from Washington, reviewing the ledgers and taking Rebecca's testimony. Arrest warrants were issued for Whitman and several of his associates. Through it all, Rebecca moved as if in a fog, going through the motions while her heart remained in the mountains with Reed. On the morning of the 4th day, Marshal Blackwood appeared at her door. His expression gave nothing away as he removed his hat. "Madam, there's someone here to see you." Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. "Is it?" Before she could finish, a familiar figure appeared behind Blackwood. Reed stood there, his clothes trail worn and a bandage visible beneath his torn shirt, but very much alive. With a cry that was half sob, half laughter, Rebecca rushed forward. Reed caught her in his arms, holding her so tightly she could scarcely breathe, but she didn't care. He was here. He was alive. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered against his chest. "I promised I'd find you," he reminded her, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm a man of my word." Blackwood cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to catch up. Read my office when you're ready. We have matters to discuss." After he departed, Reed led Rebecca to a small sofa by the window. Only then did she notice the stiffness in his movements, the careful way he held himself. "You're hurt," she said, suddenly fearful again. "It's nothing serious," he assured her. "Bullet grazed my side, I've had worse shaving." His attempt at humor fell flat as Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Hey," he said gently, "I'm here, I'm fine." "What happened?" she asked, needing to hear the full story. Reed sighed. "Whitman's men were persistent. I led them on a merry chase through some rough country, but they caught up eventually. There was a fight. I managed to take down 2 of them, but the others cornered me near Elk Ridge." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Luckily, that's when Blackwood's men showed up. Seems they're better trackers than I gave them credit for." "And Whitman?" Rebecca asked. "Have they arrested him?" Reed nodded. "This morning. He was trying to flee to Canada. They caught him at the border crossing." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "It's over, Rebecca, really over." The reality of it washed over her like a wave. The freedom she'd fought for was finally, truly hers. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Reed said, "there will be a trial. With the ledgers and your testimony, Whitman will spend years behind bars." He hesitated. "And I've been offered a position here in Helena. Special investigator for the federal court." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You're staying in Helena, if you are," he said simply. "What about your badge?" Marshal Blackwood mentioned matters to discuss. Reed grimaced. "I broke a few rules. There will be consequences, but Blackwood thinks the badge can be saved, given the circumstances and the outcome." Rebecca touched his face gently. "And if it can't, then I'll find another way to uphold justice." His eyes held hers. "What matters most is that we're both here, both safe. The rest we can figure out together." Together. The word had never sounded so beautiful. "I love you, Thomas Reed," Rebecca said, the words coming easily now that she'd nearly lost him. "Whatever comes next, I love you." Reed's smile was like coming home after a long journey. "And I love you, Rebecca Porter, more than I knew was possible." When he kissed her, it felt like a beginning, the first page of a story they would write together, day by day, year by year. A story not of running and fear, but of standing strong side by side. A story of love found in the most unexpected of places, between a woman brave enough to flee and a man strong enough to stay. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Rebecca Porter became Rebecca Reed in a simple ceremony at Sadie Wilson's trading post. The elderly woman had insisted on hosting, declaring it only fitting since she'd had a hand in getting them together in the first place. Whitman's trial had concluded 2 months earlier, resulting in a 30-year sentence that effectively ended his reign of terror. The silver mines now operated under new management. With improved safety measures and fair wages changes Reed had helped implement in his new role as special investigator. As for Rebecca, she had found her own purpose, working alongside Sadie to help other women escape abusive situations. The small house she and Reed had purchased on the outskirts of Helena often served as a temporary haven for those in need, a fact that filled her with quiet pride. Standing beside the man she loved, exchanging vows beneath an arch of wildflowers, Rebecca felt the final pieces of her past falling away. The frightened woman who had fled into the night was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had learned that love was not about possession but partnership. "I told you he'd come looking," she whispered to Reed as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. He smiled, pulling her closer. "And I told you to let him find me first." They had both kept their promises, and in doing so they had found not just justice but each other the greatest reward of all. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit around Sadie's trading post, Reed led his bride away from the celebration to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. In the distance, the lights of Helena twinkled like earthbound stars. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist from behind. Rebecca leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. "More than I ever dreamed possible," and it was true. From the depths of despair, she had found not just escape, but a love that healed old wounds and promised new beginnings. A love born in danger but built to last through whatever peace or storms might come their way. Together, they watched the first stars appear in the deepening blue sky. Two people who had found in each other not just safety, but home, the truest definition of love in a wild and unpredictable world.